Hey guys, thanks for stopping. I figure I might as well, just for those who don't know, explain what lead climbing is. So I put together a little sort of slideshow. I made a couple of paint drawings and show you through that, and I'll show you some of the gear that I use. Alright, here we go. In this little picture I drew, you can see the rock climber and the belayer having the rope piled next to him. Both start on the ground. Now here's one of the most important parts of rock climbing. You need to know your partner and know that they're competent and they know what they're doing, whether it's belaying or climbing. There's a major trust involved because if somebody is incompetent, somebody could die. But if both parties know what they're doing, it's extremely safe. It's safer than hiking to the climb. But we have a contract that we go through every single time we are going to start climbing. You can see the climber says on belay, and that's asking the belayer whether or not they're ready, and also the belayer and the climber should be checking their gear to make sure all straps and knots are tied correctly and that everything is woven through, the rope is woven through the ATC correctly and everything's locked for locking beaners, just to make sure. And then when everything is ready, the belayer says belay is on. Then it sounds redundant, but then when the climber is ready to start climbing, he says climbing, and then the belayer says climb on. Now, during those two steps seem, like I say, a little redundant, but it's important because things could be happening. Belayer's always on belay until the climber comes down from the climb, or the climber attaches himself to a belay station, like you'll see in the next frames, and he says off belay. In lead climbing, as you progress up the climb, you clip yourself into the pieces of protection. In crack climbing, the two on the left, you actually place a piece into the rock. Like in the middle, it's more of a choke stone or a nut. And on a more parallel climb like the far left, it's more like a camming device. In sport climbing, where the bolts have been drilled into the climb, you will clip a draw to a loop that is secured to the rock. As you progress up the wall, if you were to fall, you end up being caught by the rope and the belayer at the bottom, because the belayer feeds rope to you, and if for some odd reason you fall, he will lock it off. Now, as you progress up to the belay station, where you can see in the cracks, they have three pieces of protection, all brought to a center point and equalized. And in the sport climbing route, you will, or any place where there are chains or bolts, you will equalize those bolts. From that point on, a new contract is formed on belay, belay on, climbing, climb on, and the roles switch, and the next person will clear the gear from either the crack or the bolts. From that point, they can move on upwards in any kind of a traditional climb or sport climb if there are additional pitches above it. As you can see, I laid out all my gear. It was good to go through it and sort it, because the last time I went climbing, like 2 years ago, the stuff was still all just jumbled together. But I'm only going to get into some of the protection. These right here are quad cams. This is a fairly decent set.
It's almost complete. There's a few that are a little bit bigger than these, and there's actually a couple in between here that I could use. Basically, these go into what would be more of a parallel type of a crack, and there's a little trigger, and you can squeeze them and put them into the crack. And the harder that you pull on the little strap, the more that these gears push against the rock. So it works really great in parallel type of placement situations. You can also use them in other situations, but like pretty much they go anywhere. But they're big and bulky. These are tri-cams, which means that well, you can use them like a nut, like normal, you know, in a bottleneck, or you can place them in something that's slightly more parallel, like this, and then the harder that you pull down, it sort of rocks this, and it has 3 points of contact, those two, and then the point. These are just nuts, we call them. They just go into bottlenecks. There's different sizes. They also taper that way along with this way. And then we have hexes, which are another type of nut, but can also have a camming ability if you put them in to a crack like this. Because the harder that you pull down, it twists this and drives that and this point into the rock. Also, hexes are great because they're tapered in all sorts of ways. You can see they're tapered this way, tapered that way, and when you can't find a placement, these guys you'll find a way to put this into the rock. And then I'll just go through, just show you my rope. Regular rope, 60 meters, which is 200 foot. Most climbs in the United States are approximately 100 foot pitches, or under 100 foot if it's a top rope, so it's perfect size for around here in Wisconsin. Well, I hope that helped out a little bit, and maybe you got a little bit better understanding as to how rock climbing works. And anyways, look forward to my next video on the Corey Ingalls route. Alright guys, keep it real.